Hello. I'm gonna be taking my psychology exam in here just a little bit of minutes. I've been having a little bit of a weird day. A little bit of a weird day. So, anyways, we're going to talk about psychology. So let's get started. It's going to be modules 4 or exams for units 4 through 6. Let's see if I can speed run this. Okay. So, sensation is the detection of physical stimuli from the environment into neural impulses. Perception is the selection and interpretation of information and conscious understanding. Signal detection theory means the stimulus detection is a subjective decision that includes two components: sensitivity to stimulus in the presence of distractions, as well as criteria used to make the judgment from ambiguous information. So, in like shorter words, is a person aware, and also is the stimulus even present in the first place? The absolute threshold is the minimum amount of stimulation required to sense or perceive it 50% of the time. So 50% because of the chance, it's a chance of guessing if the stimulus is present. Everyone has both a sensory and perceptual absolute threshold, so sensing and awareness. So supraliminal stimuli are above the threshold, so it can be sensed and perceived. Now, subliminal stimuli are below the threshold. If it is subliminal to the sensory threshold, then it can't be sensed or perceived. But if it's subliminal to the perception threshold, it can maybe be sensed but not perceived. So, blind sight is one of the pathways carrying the visual info to the visual cortex is damaged. So, this is when people cannot see the information but can make correct judgment about the object. So, this is no sense, but yes, perception. Prosopagnosia is the inability to recognize people by looking at faces. So, you can sense, but you can't perceive. The difference threshold is the bare minimum change in stimulation required for you to be capable to sense or perceive change 50% of the time. This is also known as Weber's law, and this basically means a large stimulus needs a large difference for that same difference to be perceived. So, for example, like um, if you're gonna be loud, right? You're gonna give a loud noise. You have to make the noise a lot louder for somebody to perceive that noise being loud. If you have a small sound, it's easier to detect like this that small sound getting louder by because there's only a small change needed. And again, it's different from like loud sounds. Okay, so we're going to talk about the eye here in just a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about sensory adaptation. This is less and less response to a constant stimulus. So, for example, I have a necklace. Sensory adaptation will have me not feeling the necklace after I wear it for a long time. Transduction is the process of translating physical sensory information into neural impulses. So we're talking about the eye. The cornea allows light to enter the eye, and it bends the light. The iris dilates and contracts the pupil, which controls the light entering the eye. The lens they have ciliary muscles that flatten to focus on far images and contract to focus on closer images. The retina contains cones and rods to transduce light into neural images. Rods and cones are receptor cells, so rods will detect peripheral light and movement, and then cones detect color and clarity, and it's your central vision. Your fovea contains only cones and is like really high acuity on the retina. Your blind spot is the place where the optic nerve connects to your retina. Primary visual cortex in the occipital lobe. That each hemisphere has an input for both eyes. So the left hemisphere has like the right visual field, and the right hemisphere has a left visual field. Each eye has a different right and left visual field. Secondary processing after the primary visual cortex, so that's the ventral pathway. So like the primary visual cortex is the primary processing. Secondary processing includes either the ventral pathway, which identifies objects and people and leads to inferior temporal lobe, and the dorsal pathway is locating spatial environment, perceiving location and motion, and leads to the posterior parietal lobe. Seeing color, so a visible spectrum of color is between 400 to 700 nanometers wavelength. The shorter wavelengths are violet or blue, Medium wavelengths are green or yellow, and then longer is orange and red. Trichromatic theory is the color vision results in three kinds of cones that are sensitive to particular wavelengths of light. So S cones are short. This is sensitive to blue and violet. Medium cones are cyan, green, and yellow. And then long cones are yellow, orange, and red. So additive mixing says that R plus G plus B equals white and not brown. The opponent process theory is like means like in addition to these three photoreceptors, these cones can also communicate to the brain that they are excited or inhibited. So, for example, if a cone is not stimulated, it means an opposite color is stimulated. So, for example, an inactive S cone means that there's exposure to yellow light, or yeah, because yellow is M and L cone. So again, if the S cone isn't stimulated, it means some other cone is being stimulated. So we're talking about the ear now. There's the three small bones called the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. These vibrate when impacted by sound waves. The cochlea is a fluid-filled tube that impacts hearing and balance. The nerve fibers connect the auditory nerve to the cochlea. The auditory nerves transmit neural signals to the brain. Basically, sound goes from the eardrum to the ossicles to the oval window, the cilia, and then the neurotransmitter is released. Hearing is determined by a sound's wavelength and amplitude. Wavelength is the pitch and measured in hertz, and then amplitude is basically like how high the wave goes, and it determines the sound volume. The sound frequency is encoded through temporal coding for lower frequency and place coding for higher frequency. Brains use I don't know how to read that, differences to locate sounds. It's interaural, sorry. Interaural time difference, or the between when a sound reaches one ear and when it reaches the other ear, and intraaural intensity difference, which is between intensity of sound at one ear and the other ear. So that's how you locate sounds. Um, so, for example, if I hear the snap on this ear, you hear it here first before you hear it here. Anyways, other senses include gustation, which is taste, olfaction, which is smell, touch, which is either pressure by mechanoreceptors, pain by nociceptors, and positions by proprioceptors, and also thermoceptors. Perceptual grouping and perceptual closure, which is complete forms, good combination, which is assuming a straight line that continues even when blocked. So that's what your perceptual grouping is. Depth perceptions is allowed due to convergence, visual disparity, relative height and detail, and occlusion, which is blocking of farther objects by closer ones. So it'll help us see depth and distance. Okay, now we're going to move on to memory. So memory, there's two different definitions. The behaviorist definition of memory is the indication that learning has persisted over time. So this is like behavior that like learned procedures, habits, and words. The cognitive and biological definition is the ability of the nervous system to retain and retrieve skills and knowledge. So like neural locations, encoding, and damage. That's the support. The information processing model, you have three things that's part of it. So you have encoding, which is transforming sense and perception into mental information. Then you have storage, which is information held, and is also subject to loss if it's not re-encoded. And then retrieval, which is using the information through recall and recognition. The components of memory, you got three. You got sensory memory, which is high accuracy, high capacity, short lived, and is the initial encoding. Working memory, which is like basically your attention. It's a filter to decide, you have to filter it to decide what information from sensory memory to attend to and process. And this has a limited time storage and capacity. Long-term memory is high capacity and durable. There's technically no capacity, like there's like unlimited capacity pretty much. And attention and devotion equals more time in the long-term memory. Okay, working memory and long-term memory information exchange. So the serial position effect, this means that it's easier to remember the first and last item in a presented list. The primacy event effect is so like the encoding gets less and less like success, like less and less better, meaning like you remember the first thing better than the next one. And then the recency effect is you are able to recall the last presented item easier than the ones before. So eliminating the recency effect, you can do that by using the an interference. When you're using a cognitive load task that uses space and the working memory, recovering the recent information and interfering with recency effect doesn't interfere with primacy effect because the info is still stored in the long-term memory. So you can like do some like distracting thing to prevent the recency effect, but it still won't really have a lot of the privacy effect. There's two types of encoding. Automatic encoding, which is fast, efficient, and requires minimal awareness. And then effortful encoding, which has a larger long-term memory endurance based on maintenance rehearsal. So maintenance rehearsal is basically repetition and focus on remembering, but also elaborative rehearsal, which is thinking and making connections and focused on understanding. Each of these types are each effective in their own way. There's two types of representational storage. Simplistic storage is basically a schema, which is a basic organization with simple concepts that we relate with an idea. Elaborative storage is an elaborative schema that demonstrates deep understanding about that idea. Scripts are schemas for events, actually, as opposed to items or ideas, and it helps us predict what's going to happen next. So, for example, like you kind of have a script as to what you're going to be acting like in a restaurant. There's types of long-term memory. Explicit memory is you being consciously aware and can verbally describe um, uh, a memory. This includes episodic memory, which is personal experiences, and semantic memory, which is facts about the world, like objects and words. Then you have implicit memory, which is unconscious and non declarative. This has procedural, which is automatic or motor memory, and then classical conditioning, which is associating two stimuli which elicit a response. There's two types of retrieval. You have recall, which is recovering information without assistance on cues directly from the long term memory. It's prone to blocking or absent mindedness. Recognition is comparison with what we see with your long term memory, and this is prone to misattribution. Reconsolidation is basically the idea of use it to lose it. So the original memory can be altered during reconsolidation. So if you don't use that memory, it can be altered. So the depth of processing, you have two again. Uh, by shallow processing, it's by repetition and results in simplistic storage. It's kind of like a post-it note. Now, deep processing is by thinking about it in multiple ways, and this results in complex and structured storage. So, how do you improve memory? By practicing retrieval. Easy retrieval by enhancing coding. You have to enhance coding by using the most effective, effortful strategies. The encoding specificity principle. So if it wires together, it fires together. Meaning, if you encode something, it will be retrieved with the same things that you encode it with. So examples of this would be retrieval queues, which is concept or idea that assistant of retrieval of other information stored in the memory. So they work by priming or making more accessible and by spreading activation. Another example of the encoding specificity principle, there's context or state dependent learning, meaning there's contextual cues present at the time of encoding, for example, like your environment, your emotion, people, and senses, and it can be used as a retrieval cue. The third example is mnemonic devices. They can help, but are more useful if you understand the meanings behind them. They help connect mundane to interesting, connect new and old information, and helps use multiple types of memory. How memory can be tricked. You have amnesia because you forgot that I'm him, and it results in memory loss from injury. Interrograde amnesia is you're not able to form new memories, but you have the old ones. Retrograde amnesia is you can you can remember the new things, but can't remember the old things. Interference is not remembering um, because a different memory is interfering with it. So, for example, like you don't remember your old password because your new passwords are interfering with them. Suggestibility, meaning misleading information learned later, can affect existing memories. So, like gaslighting. False memories is believing that something happened even though it didn't. And then flashbulb memories, which is super vivid and clear memories often associated with arousing or dramatic events. And because memories are constructed, they aren't always accurate and faithful. Now we're going to move on to developmental psychology. You got um, prenatal development. This is from your zygote to embryo to fetus and then birth. Um, so this is when your neurons in your brain and spinal cord develop, and your embryo is vulnerable to teratogens like alcohol, so that'll cause fetal alcoholic syndrome. Um, and then after the prenatal, you have infancy, which is 18 to 24 months, childhood, which is 2 to 11 years, adolescence, it's 12 to 18, and then adulthood, which is 18 until death. Um, there's different types of like terms you gotta know. Contact comfort is the physical and emotional comfort an infant receives from physical contact. The attachment style, you got three of them. This is a nature of relationship between infant and caregiver. There are usually a secure attachment is free exploration, moderate distress in the absence of a caregiver, and then easily calmed. So the caregiver is comfort. Now, insecure avoidant means the baby is uncomfortable when the caregiver is present. There's no concern in their absence, and then they avoid caregiver in their presence. Insecure, anxious, and ambivalent is clingy, uncomfortable, highly distressed, and inconsolable. So there's parenting and attachment styles. So secure, parents with stronger social emotional functioning, relationships, and schooling can result in secure forms of attachment. Parents that are dismissive of their emotion and stress and reluctant to commit can lead to avoidant styles. And then parents inconsistent with their treatment and will result in anxious. Sorry. And then in adulthood, they will lack trust in partners and frequently seek reassurance. So, how can children develop schemas? There's two types. So, assimilation is new info incorporated into an already existing, well developed, and somewhat rigid schema. Accommodation is the existing schema is adjusted to a new schema, or a new schema is created. So, this is complex and greater utility. Okay, so there's stages. Piaget had like 4 stages of cognitive development. The first one is the sensory motor stage. This is defined by sensory capabilities, basically everything but vision at birth, and then motor development, which is like palmar grasp, rooting, which is turned towards cheek stimulation, the motor reflex, which is response to loud noises, and sudden movement. And this is more frequent when an infant has experienced falling. And then also, Babinski reflex is the fanning of your toes. Reflexes serve more as like survival advantages, and they develop into gross and fine motor control. Other milestones in the sensory motor stage include object permanence and self recognition. The pre-operational stage is an emphasis on symbolic representation. So you can understand more like receptive, which is understanding, or expressive, which is producing language. Centration results in errors when making comparisons on size, quantity, mass, and dimension. And then egocentrism results in inability to comprehend a perspective other than one's own. Theory of mind is the understanding that other people have different views and beliefs. The third stage is the concrete operational. This is an emphasis on logical and mathematical operations, only on concrete and not as abstract concepts. Transitive inference allows comparing two concepts to each other by using a third concept. Now, formal operational stage is that last one, starts from 12 years and up. It's sophisticated in abstract reasoning and creative problem solving. This allows flexible thinking on problems that challenge their reasoning. So there's challenges to Piaget's like model. So children can move back and forth between levels, and some adults may be restricted to some concrete levels of reasoning because they're stupid. Okay, so you got 3 types of Kohlberg stages of moral development. So pre-conventional means that morality is determined by self-interest, pleasure, and outcome. So like rewards and punishments, and their decisions are based on how pleasurable the outcome result is. So if you ask somebody in the stage what's right or wrong, they'll answer based on what you like what your reaction is. So like if you ask like, "Oh, is stealing candy right or wrong?" and they're gonna say no because you're gonna be like, "Oh, well, here's the candy," whatever. Um, and then conventional is concerned with um sorry, no, sorry, pre-conventional, sorry. They're gonna answer it's right to steal candy because you want to. Sorry, that's pre-conventional. Conventional is concerned with authority, focused on following rules and avoiding disapproval. So they're gonna say it's not right to steal candy because it's not the rules, basically. So that's a conventional. Now, post-conventional, the morality is based on complex reasoning about abstract principles and about value of all life. They understand both conventional and pre-conventional concepts, but feel conflicted as they feel that the rules are unfair. And people on this stage tend to take more time deliberating. So basically, they'll be like, "It's not right to steal candy, but if there's candy and nobody's eating it and nobody's using it, then technically you're not stealing. And also, like, even if you were to steal, who cares? So people progress through these levels as they develop more mature understanding. Okay, 21 minutes. I'm done. Yeah, hopefully the test goes well. Bye.